The concrete exploded into dust and fragments. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, trembling in frozen hands. Below, in that impossible hollow beneath the basement steps, something moved. A child's cry, thin, broken, barely human. Chief Miller dropped to his knees at the edge of the pit, his breath caught. Through the settling debris, he saw it, a small hand, pale as death, fingers curled against the cold. "She's alive," he whispered, then louder, urgent. "Dear God, she's still alive." Rex collapsed beside him, muzzle stained dark, legs shaking. The German shepherd had refused to move from this spot for 20 minutes, clawing until his paws bled. Red and blue lights strobed through the February blizzard outside. Paramedics rushed in. But one question burned through the chaos. How does a 6-year-old girl end up buried alive beneath concrete steps in the dead of Michigan winter, and why was an aging cake scheduled for termination next week? The only one who knew she was there. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 years earlier, the Thompson family had been the heart of their small Michigan town. James Thompson wore his police chief's badge with quiet pride. The kind of man who knew every shopkeeper by name and never missed a Little League game. His wife, Sarah, worked night shifts at County General, her gentle hands healing the sick, while James kept the streets safe. Their daughter, Emma, was 3 years old then, all bright eyes and missing teeth. Tottering after her father's K-pool partners like he was a furry guardian angel, Rex had been James's shadow since puppyhood. The German shepherd learned to track suspects through snowdrifts and detect danger before it arrived. But his favorite duty was unofficial, letting Emma climb on his back during backyard picnics. Her tiny fingers tangled in his fur, while James grilled hamburgers and Sarah laughed at something only the two of them understood. "Always trust the canes, sweetheart," James would tell Emma, hoisting her onto his shoulders. "They never lie. They can't." Those words felt like prophecy now. The end came on a Tuesday. Domestic disturbance call on Maple Street routine, or so everyone thought. James had responded to dozens of them. But this time, the husband had a gun he hadn't disclosed, rage he couldn't control, and nothing left to lose. By the time backup arrived, James Thompson was bleeding out on a stranger's kitchen floor, his radio still crackling with his final words, "Tell Sarah I—" The funeral stretched across 3 days. Half the state showed up. Rex lay beside the closed casket the entire viewing, refusing food, refusing comfort, refusing to accept that his partner wasn't coming back. Sarah became a ghost in her own life. The police chief's pension couldn't cover the mortgage and James's medical bills from his final ambulance ride. The hospital sent letters, $127,000 owed. Then the bank started calling about the default in missed payments. Sarah worked 3 jobs waitressing at the diner, driving Uber through frozen nights, cleaning offices until her hands cracked and bled. She barely saw Emma anymore, barely saw anything. Rex went back to the department, reassigned to the Caden unit. But none of the younger officers wanted to work with him. Too old, they said, too slow, too sad. He spent his days in the kennel, staring at nothing, waiting for a master who would never return. James's brother Michael had promised to help. He'd been the family's project for years. Addiction, petty theft, the kind of destruction that consumed everything it touched. But James had never given up on him. Pulled him from jail cells 5 times, paid for 2 rounds of rehab. "He's still my brother," James would say whenever Sarah suggested cutting ties. After the funeral, Michael swore he'd changed, swore he'd be there for Sarah and Emma, swore on his brother's grave. Some promises rot before they're even spoken. 72 hours before they found Emma, Sarah Thompson kissed her daughter goodnight and left for the graveyard shift at County General. Michael had volunteered to babysit, he insisted on it. Actually, after Sarah mentioned she couldn't afford the usual sitter, he'd seemed sober lately, clean-shaven, almost like the brother-in-law she'd known before the drugs hollowed him out. "Go on," Michael had said, waving her toward the door. "Emma and I will be fine. We'll watch cartoons and eat too much ice cream. You know, uncle stuff." Sarah returned home at 6 in the morning to an empty house. Emma's bed was still made. Her coat still hung on its hook. The television sat dark and silent. Michael was gone too. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed 911. Then again when Officer Daniels arrived, a silver-haired veteran who'd served under James for 15 years. Daniels took notes with grim efficiency, but Sarah could see the truth in his eyes. The first 48 hours were critical. After that, statistics turned brutal. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera showed Michael's rusted pickup leaving at 2 in the morning, driving slow, deliberate, like a man with something to hide. By noon, they'd found the ransom note stuffed in Sarah's mailbox. Block letters scrawled across notebook paper. $50,000. Instructions coming. The phone number listed went straight to a disconnected voicemail. 50,000, the exact amount of James's life insurance policy. Money Sarah had already spent on funeral costs and overdue bills. Daniels made calls but put out an AP. Meanwhile, across to town at the police department, Rex had started acting strange. The old German shepherd paced his kennel, whining at nothing. When Daniels brought Emma's jacket for him to scent something Sarah had grabbed in desperation, Rex erupted, barking, clawing at the chain link, spinning in frantic circles. The younger K-9 officer, Hayes, rolled his eyes. "That dog's losing it, probably dementia." "He knows something," Daniel said quietly. "He's 8 years old and half deaf. We've got drones now. Thermal imaging. We don't need—" "I'm taking him." Hayes shrugged. "Your funeral. Department's cutting the K-9 program next month. Anyway, too expensive. Rex is first on the list." Daniels clipped a lead to Rex's collar and led him out into the February cold. The dog pulled hard toward the east side of town, toward the neighborhood where James and Sarah used to live before the bank sent foreclosure notices. Their old house sat empty now, windows dark, a realtor's lockbox hanging from the front door. Scheduled for demolition to make room for a strip mall, Daniels had already checked it once. Nothing. But Rex wouldn't leave. He circled the property, nose low, breath steaming. When Daniels tried to pull him back to the car, Rex planted his paws and snarled the first time he'd ever defied an order. "What is it, boy?" Daniels whispered. Rex stared at the house like it held ghosts, or something worse. 48 hours left. The temperature was dropping, and somewhere in this frozen town, a 6-year-old girl was running out of time. 48 hours before the rescue. Sarah sat alone in her car outside the pharmacy. In her lap, a bottle of sleeping pills, 60 tablets, more than enough. She'd already written the note, already decided Emma would be better off with her aunt in Wisconsin than with a mother who couldn't protect her, couldn't pay the bills, couldn't even keep her own brother-in-law from stealing her child. The insurance, if there was any left, would go to Emma, a final gift from a woman who'd failed at everything else. Sarah unscrewed the cap. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. A knock on the window made her jump. Mrs. Anderson stood there in her threadbare coat, white hair escaping from beneath a knitted cap. The 80-year-old widow from 2 houses down, the one everyone said talked too much, cared too much, remembered too much. Unlock this door right now, Sarah Thompson. Sarah complied without thinking. Mrs. Anderson slid into the passenger seat, took one look at the pills, and snatched them away. "Don't you dare," the old woman said. "Don't you dare do this to that little girl." "She's gone," Sarah whispered. "Emma's gone, and it's my fault. I let him in. I trusted him. Your husband trusted him, too. Does that make James a fool? James is dead. And you think joining him helps Emma? How?" "Exactly." Mrs. Anderson's voice cracked. "I lost my son when he was 7. Leukemia. I wanted to die every single day for a year, but I didn't. You know why?" Sarah shook her head. "Because giving up would have meant his life didn't matter, that all the love I poured into him was wasted." Mrs. Anderson gripped Sarah's hand. "Emma is still out there. I feel it, and she needs you to be stronger than this." Sarah broke then, sobbing against the old woman's shoulder while sleet pounded the windshield. Across town at the police station, Rex lay in his kennel, muzzle on his paws. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The younger officers ignored him. Just an old dog waiting to die. But Officer Daniels kept returning to the foreclosed Thompson house. Something wasn't right. The place had been empty. For months, Sarah had moved out after the bank took possession. Yet Rex kept circling back to the basement entrance, a side door that led down concrete steps to the old foundation. Daniels had searched it already, nothing but cobwebs and mildew. City inspectors had marked it safe for demolition. Still, Rex wouldn't leave. He'd sit at the top of those basement steps for hours, whining. Once, Daniels found him trying to dig through the gap beneath the door, paws bloody from the effort. "There's nothing down there, boy," Daniels said, but his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, investigators tracked Michael to a bus station. Security footage showed him buying a ticket to El Paso. Cash transaction, one way. In his pocket, $8,000 borrowed from a loan shark at 30% interest, the kind of debt that broke kneecaps when it came due. Michael Thompson wasn't coming back, and he wasn't giving up Emma's location. 24 hours left. The temperature hit 15 below zero, and in that abandoned house, beneath stairs no one thought to examine twice. A little girl shivered under a police jacket that still smelled like her father. 24 hours before the rescue, the FBI joined the search. Federal kidnapping protocols kicked in phone taps, forensic analysis, interviews with every person Michael had contacted in the past 6 months. The investigation sprawled across 3 counties, following leads that went nowhere. Gas station surveillance caught Michael filling up his truck near the Ohio border. He'd looked exhausted, paranoid, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. But he'd paid cash and disappeared into the winter night. The bus ticket to El Paso appeared to be misdirection he never boarded. Michael was still somewhere in Michigan. But where? The weather turned vicious. Meteorologists predicted the worst blizzard in 20 years. Temperature projections dropped to -15, with wind chills approaching 40 below. Exposure time before hypothermia less than 10 minutes, Iuka. For a child Emma's size, even less. Search and rescue teams fanned across abandoned buildings, checking warehouses, storage units, any place Michael might hide a hostage. Bloodhounds tracked his scent to a homeless encampment under the highway overpass, then lost it in the labyrinth of cardboard and frozen desperation. Sarah sat in the police station's waiting room, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders. She'd stopped crying, stopped talking, just stared at the clock as the hours bled away. Mrs. Anderson brought coffee Sarah wouldn't drink. Daniels brought updates that meant nothing. And outside, the snow began to fall in thick, suffocating curtains. Officer Hayes appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, the glow illuminating his face. "We should be using thermal drones. I've been saying it for months. Technology beats instinct every time. We could scan the entire grid in hours." "Department can't afford drones," Daniel said quietly. "That's why they're cutting the K-9 program." "Then maybe it's time to admit the old ways don't work anymore." Hayes glanced toward the kennel area. "That dog's been worthless. Just sits there howling." Daniel stood abruptly. "I'm taking Rex out again. In this weather, you'll both freeze. Then we'll freeze." Daniels grabbed his coat. "James Thompson saved my life once. Took a bullet meant for me during a traffic stop. I'm not giving up on his daughter because some kid with a computer says dogs are obsolete." He found Rex pacing his kennel, jaded and haggard, wild-eyed. The moment Daniels opened the gate, the shepherd bolted not toward the exit, but toward the gear room where they stored his work harness. The harness he hadn't worn since James died. Daniel's hands shook as he buckled it on. "You smell something, don't you? You know where she is?" Rex pulled him straight back to the Thompson house, through the blizzard, through drifts that reached their knees. The old dog moved with purpose Daniels hadn't seen in 3 years. They arrived at the foreclosed property as darkness fell. The house loomed like a tombstone, empty windows staring at nothing. But Rex didn't go to the front door. He circled to the side entrance, the one leading to the basement steps. The door they'd checked 3 times already. This time, Rex didn't just whine. He attacked the door, clawing, biting, throwing his entire weight against the wood. Splinters flew. His paws left bloody streaks in the snow. "Rex, stop, there's nothing." The dog snarled at him, actually snarled, then returned to his assault on the door, digging at the concrete foundation like he could tunnel through solid stone. Daniels pulled out his radio. "This is Officer Daniels. I need backup at the old Thompson residence and bring excavation equipment." "Excavation, Daniels? What? Just do it, now." Chief Miller arrived 20 minutes later with 2 other officers and a contractor who owed the department a favor. They stood in the swirling snow and staring at Daniels like he'd lost his mind. "You want us to jackhammer through basement steps," Miller said slowly, "because a dog is barking. Not just barking." Daniels pointed. "Look at him." Rex had stopped his frantic attack. Now he sat rigid at the base of the steps, every muscle locked, his gaze fixed on the concrete. The textbook alert position the stance trained K-9s took when they detected exactly what they'd been searching for. A living human being. Miller studied the old shepherd for a long moment. Then he looked at Daniels. James trusted this dog with his life. Yes, sir. All right. Miller nodded to the contractor. Break it open. The jackhammer roared to life, and somewhere beneath their feet, in darkness no one had thought to examine, Emma Thompson heard the sound and whispered her first words in 3 days. Daddy. The jackhammer's scream shattered the winter silence. Concrete dust bloomed into the air, mixing with snow, creating a ghostly fog that burned throats and stung eyes. The contractor worked in 15-minute intervals, muscles straining, all sweat freezing on his face despite the sub-zero temperature. Rex refused to move. Daniels had to physically restrain him as chunks of concrete flew past. The dog fought the leash, whining continuously now, a sound that raised the hair on everyone's neck. Not the bark of detection, the cry of desperation. 6 inches down, the contractor yelled over the noise. This is fresh pour, maybe 2 weeks old. Miller's jaw tightened. Keep going. The jackhammer bit deeper. 4 officers stood in a semicircle, flashlights trained on the growing hole. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the machine's industrial roar and Rex's anguished keening. Then the bit punched through into empty space. The contractor stumbled back. The jackhammer died. In the sudden silence, everyone heard it, a sound like wind through a crack, like breathing, like something alive in the dark. Miller dropped to his knees, pressed his face to the gap. Flashlight! Now! Daniel shoved his light into the chief's hand. The beam disappeared into the hole, probing shadows that shouldn't exist beneath a basement staircase. The foundation should have been solid earth, maybe a shallow crawl space. Instead, the light revealed depth, a cavity someone had carved and concealed. There's a chamber down there, Miller said, his voice barely audible. Hand dug, maybe 4 feet deep. He angled the light downward. The beam swept across dirt walls, exposed roots, a McDonald's bag with molding French fries, a plastic water bottle lying on its side, and in the farthest corner, wrapped in something dark and shapeless, oh God. Miller whispered, I see her. The officers moved like they'd been electrocuted. The contractor attacked the concrete with renewed fury, no longer concerned with precision, just speed. Chunks the size of dinner plates broke free. The hole widened to 2 feet, then 3. Daniels couldn't hold Rex anymore. The shepherd lunged forward, front paws scrabbling at the broken concrete, trying to force his way down. His claws scraped stone. His weight shifted. For a terrifying moment, he nearly fell into the pit. Rex, no! Daniels grabbed his collar, hauled him back. The dog twisted in his grip, frantic, a sound like sobbing coming from deep in his chest. Miller widened the hole enough to fit through. I'm going down. Somebody radio for paramedics. Tell them hypothermia protocol. He lowered himself into the darkness, boots finding purchase on the earthen wall. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, then steadied on the small form in the corner. Emma. His voice cracked. Emma, honey, can you hear me? No response. Miller crawled forward on his hands and knees. The space was barely large enough for a grown man, dirt ceiling inches from his head, the air thick with the smell of urine and fear, and something else, the metallic tang that came with extreme cold, affecting human tissue. He reached her, pulled back what he'd thought was a blanket, and realized was a police jacket, James Thompson's jacket. The one that had gone missing from evidence storage 6 months ago. Michael must have kept it, used it to cover his niece while he buried her alive. Emma's face was gray, lips blue-purple, eyes closed, her small body rigid with cold, wearing the same pajamas she'd had on 72 hours ago, pink fabric with cartoon characters. Now stained and torn. Miller pressed 2 fingers to her throat, felt nothing, tried again, shifting position, pressing harder. There, faint as a whisper, a pulse. "She's alive!" he shouted. "Get a stretcher down here! Move!" He gathered Emma into his arms, this tiny frozen thing that weighed nothing at all, lifted her toward the hole. Hands reached down, taking her with desperate gentleness. Daniels received her like she was made of glass. Laying her on the snow-covered ground, Rex was there instantly. The old dog circled Emma's limp form, sniffing frantically, then pressed his body against hers, sharing warmth, the way pack animals do for injured members. Daniels checked for breathing. She's barely... Emma's eyes fluttered, opened to slits, her gaze unfocused, seeing nothing and everything. Then her head turned slightly toward Rex. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Daniels leaned close. "What, honey? What did you say to Rex?" Barely audible, a ghost of a voice. "Daddy's Rex." Her tiny hand emerged from the jacket, fingers curling into the dog's fur, holding on like he was the only real thing in the world. The ambulance arrived in a scream of sirens. Paramedics swarmed with heated blankets and oxygen and IVs. Emma's core temperature registered 93 degrees. Another hour, and she would have been gone. They loaded her into the ambulance. Sarah arrived as the doors were closing, stumbling through the snow, Mrs. Anderson supporting her. She climbed inside without asking permission, gathering Emma's frozen body into her arms, rocking and weeping and whispering promises into her daughter's hair. The ambulance pulled away into the blizzard, lights painting the snow red and white. Daniel stood in the silence after, staring at the hole in the concrete, at the chamber below where a child had spent 3 days in darkness, slowly freezing to death. Rex sat beside him, panting hard, muzzle still streaked with blood from his raw paws. The old dog's eyes never left the direction the ambulance had gone. "You knew?" Daniel said quietly. "You knew the whole time." Rex whined once, then lay down in the snow, exhausted beyond measure, and closed his eyes. Emma lay in the pediatric intensive care unit, monitors beeping steady rhythms that meant alive, meant surviving, meant not dead yet. Her core temperature had climbed to 96 degrees, still dangerous, still critical, but trending upward. Sarah hadn't left her daughter's side. She sat in a plastic chair that squeaked every time she shifted weight, holding Emma's hand, whispering stories about her father, how he'd arrest speeders with a warning and a smile, how he'd buy coffee for homeless veterans, how he'd loved his girls more than anything in this world. Emma hadn't spoken since the ambulance, hadn't opened her eyes. The pediatric psychologist warned Sarah to prepare for trauma, the kind that lived in nightmares and silences, that turned children into strangers inside their own skin. 2 hours after the rescue, forensic teams descended on the Thompson house. What they found beneath those concrete steps painted a picture of premeditation that made seasoned investigators sick. The chambers had been excavated carefully, reinforced with scrap lumber. A 5-gallon water jug sat in one corner, half empty, a box of granola bars, a battery-powered lantern that had died sometime on day 2. Michael had planned to keep Emma alive, had genuinely believed he could extract the ransom, return her safely, and somehow Sarah would forgive him. The concrete pour was recent, exactly 14 days old, according to the contractor. Michael had spent 2 weeks preparing his niece's prison, had poured the concrete himself, leaving just enough ventilation so she wouldn't suffocate. A hidden hatch in the foundation that only someone who'd helped James renovate that basement would know existed. The ransom note analysis came back. The disconnected phone number belonged to a burner Michael had purchased and immediately destroyed after one failed call attempt. He'd panicked when Sarah didn't respond, panicked more when police started searching, had abandoned his niece in that hole and run. Chief Miller stood in his office, reviewing security footage from the bus station. Michael's face filled the screen, gaunt, desperate, crying as he bought that ticket to El Paso he'd never use. Miller had known Michael since he was 16, had arrested him for possession, for theft, for assault, had watched James bail him out every single time. "Find him," Miller told the detective squad. "I want him found today." They located Michael, but 3 hours later at a motel outside Grand Rapids, 40 miles from where his niece had nearly died. He was packing a duffel bag when officers kicked in the door. Inside, $8,000 in cash, a one-way bus ticket to Mexico City, and a pint of whiskey he'd been working through since dawn. Michael didn't run, didn't resist, just collapsed on the bed and wept at the station. Detective Hayes conducted the interview. Michael sat across the metal table, hands cuffed, eyes red and hollow. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said. "I swear to God, I never meant. You buried a 6-year-old child alive. I was going to get her out. I just needed the money first. They were going to kill me, the guys I owed. They said they'd kill me if I didn't pay by Monday. I thought if I could just get Sarah's insurance money, I could pay them and give Emma back and everything would be okay. You left her in a hole to freeze to death. The phone didn't work. I couldn't call Sarah, couldn't tell her where to bring the money. And then I saw cops at the house, and I panicked. I thought if I ran to Mexico, maybe they'd keep searching and find her. Maybe Rex would—" His voice broke. "James always said Rex could find anyone. I thought maybe he'd find her. That's why I left James's jacket, so Rex would smell it." Hayes leaned forward. "You expected a dog to save her from your crime. James would have wanted. James is dead because he spent his whole life saving you." Hayes slammed the table. "Every arrest, every overdose, every disaster you caused, and he kept pulling you back. And this is how you repay him, by burying his daughter alive." Michael's face crumpled. "I became the monster my brother saved me from." The confession took 4 hours. Every detail recorded, notarized, damning. Michael Thomas Thompson, age 35, charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, attempted extortion, and a list of other charges that added up to life without parole. News crews surrounded the police station. The story had gone viral. Child buried alive, rescued by Hero KE. Networks wanted interviews. Social media exploded with outrage and grief. Everyone wanted to know about Rex, about Emma, about the uncle who'd betrayed his own blood. At the hospital, Sarah finally left Emma's room long enough to speak with Officer Daniels in the hallway. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 days. "Michael's asking to see you," Daniels said carefully. "You don't have to. No one would blame you if—" "What did James always say?" Sarah's voice was flat, drained of emotion. "Blood is thicker than water. Family is everything." Michael stopped being family when he put Emma in that hole. Sarah stared at the ICU doors. James forgave him every single time, believed people could change, that addiction was a disease, that his little brother was still in there somewhere. She turned to Daniels. "I'll see him once, so I can tell him exactly what his betrayal cost." Behind them, through the ICU window, Emma stirred. Her eyes opened, and for the first time in 72 hours, she screamed. 1 week after Emma's rescue, Chief Miller called an emergency meeting at the police station. The conference room filled with officers, city council members, and department administrators clutching budget reports like shields. Miller stood at the head of the table, jaw tight. "We need to discuss the K-9 program cuts." "There's nothing to discuss," Councilman Roberts said. "The budget shortfall is $200,000. We're eliminating the K-9 unit entirely. 4 dogs, 4 handlers reassigned. It's already decided. Rex just saved a child's life. Rex is 8 years old, past retirement age for working dogs." Roberts shuffled papers. "The veterinary costs alone for aging K-9 are unsustainable. We're investing in technology instead: drones, thermal imaging, AI-assisted search algorithms." Officer Hayes nodded from the corner. "Modern tools for modern problems." Daniel stood abruptly. "That dog found Emma when your technology couldn't. When your algorithms and your drones and your fancy equipment showed nothing." "An outlier," Roberts countered. "One success doesn't justify the expense." "Then you should know something else." Daniel's voice went quiet, dangerous. "I spoke with the vet yesterday. Rex has dilated cardiomyopathy. His heart's failing, has been for 6 months. The room went silent. "The vet says he's got maybe a year left, possibly less." Daniels looked at each person in turn. That dog knew he was dying, and he still searched for 3 days straight in sub-zero weather. Still clawed through concrete until his paws bled. Still refused to give up on finding his partner's daughter. Miller cleared his throat. "How long has he known about the heart condition?" "Since James died. The stress of losing his handler triggered it. Every vet visit since has been worse. Irregular heartbeat, fluid in the lungs. He should have been retired months ago." Daniel's hands clenched. "But he was the only one who cared enough to keep looking when everyone else had given up." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't know." "No, you just called him useless. Called him obsolete." Daniels turned to Roberts. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to cut Rex from the force, take away his purpose. After he spent his dying days saving a little girl, and the media, who are currently camped outside calling him a hero, are going to love that story." Roberts's face went pale. "Or," Miller said slowly, "we find another solution." The meeting ended without resolution, but word spread fast. By evening, the local news had picked up the story: dying K.A.'s child faces termination. By morning, it had gone national. At County General Hospital, Sarah sat beside Emma's bed while a child psychologist tried coaxing her daughter to speak. Emma hadn't said a word. since waking, just stared at the ceiling, small hands gripping the sheets, flinching at every sound. "Emma, honey?" the psychologist said gently. "Can you tell me what you remember?" "Nothing." "Can you tell me how you're feeling?" Silence. Sarah's phone buzzed. Another message from the victim advocate, another form to sign. Another reminder that Michael's arraignment was scheduled for next week and she could give a statement if she wanted, if she could bear it. She'd visited him once in county lockup, separated by plexiglass. Michael had looked small and broken, an addict who'd gambled his soul and lost. "I'm sorry." He'd whispered through the phone. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "You buried her alive." "I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just had the money—" "You left her to die in the dark." Sarah's voice had been ice. "James spent 20 years trying to save you, and this is what you did with all that love?" Michael had pressed his palm against the glass. "Tell Emma I'm sorry, please. Tell her Uncle Mike—" Sarah hung up the phone and walked out. She hadn't been back. Now, sitting in the hospital room, she watched her daughter disappear into trauma's embrace and wondered if Emma would ever come back. A knock at the door. Officer Daniels stood in the hallway, looking uncertain. "I know this isn't a good time, but I thought maybe Rex could visit. Sometimes therapy dogs help with—" "He's not a therapy dog," Sarah said. "No, he's better." Daniels glanced at Emma. "He's the dog who saved her life, and I think he needs to see her as much as she needs to see him." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Daniels returned 10 minutes later with Rex on a lead. The old German shepherd moved slowly, favoring his right front paw where the concrete had torn his pad. His coat looked dull. His breathing labored. But the moment he entered the room and saw Emma, something changed. His ears went up. His tail lifted. He pulled toward the bed with strength that surprised Daniels. Emma's head turned. Her eyes found Rex. And for the first time in a week, her expression shifted. Not quite recognition, something deeper, cellular memory of safety, of being found, of warmth in the frozen dark. Rex approached the bed carefully, nosed Emma's hand where it lay on the blanket, whined softly. Emma's fingers moved, touched his muzzle, slid into his fur. Then she whispered, so quiet Daniels almost missed it. "Rex, you found me." Her hand moved to her pajama pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, wrinkled and stained. She held it toward her mother with trembling fingers. Sarah unfolded it, recognized James's handwriting immediately, the note he'd written to Emma before his last shift. The one Sarah thought had been lost. "Always trust the cases. Sweetheart, they never lie. If you're ever lost, Rex will find you. I promise. Love, Daddy." Sarah's vision blurred. She looked at Rex, this dying dog who'd kept a dead man's promise. "James knew," she whispered. "Somehow he knew." Emma's voice came stronger now, words tumbling out after days of silence. "Uncle Mike said Daddy was gone forever, but Rex came, just like Daddy said. Rex came and found me." She wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, buried her face in his fur, and cried for the first time since the rescue, not screams of terror, but sobs of relief. Rex lay his head on the bed beside her, closed his eyes, and for a moment Everyone in that room understood they were witnessing something beyond training or instinct. They were witnessing love that death couldn't end. A promise kept across the grave, a bond that neither time nor tragedy could break. Outside, protesters had gathered at City Hall, demanding the canine program be saved. Inside the hospital, a little girl held on to the dog who'd refused to let her die. And somewhere, James Thompson's spirit could finally rest. 2 weeks after Emma's rescue, the town square filled despite the bitter cold. 300 people gathered beneath gray skies, their breath forming clouds that hung in the frozen air. Veterans in dress uniforms stood at attention. Children held signs decorated with paw prints and hearts. Local news crews positioned cameras to capture every angle. A temporary stage had been erected near the war memorial. Chief Miller stood at the podium, his voice carrying across the crowd through speakers that crackled with feedback. We gather today to honor courage, not the kind that comes from youth or strength, but the kind that persists when every logical reason says quit. Rex sat at the base of the stage, wearing his work harness. Officer Daniels stood beside him, one hand resting on the dog's head. The German shepherd's coat had been brushed until it shone, but nothing could hide how much he'd aged. His muzzle had gone completely gray. His breathing came harder now, even at rest. Sarah and Emma sat in the front row. Emma wore a new winter coat donated by Mrs. Anderson, along with most of the girls' current wardrobe. Since everything from the old house remained evidence, the 7-year-old's hand stayed buried in her mother's, but her eyes never left Rex. Canine Rex served this community for 7 years. Miller continued. In that time, he apprehended 42 suspects, located 17 missing persons, and detected contraband in over 30 searches. But statistics don't capture what makes a hero. Numbers can't measure heart. The mayor stepped forward, carrying a blue velvet box. Inside, nestled in white satin, lay the Medal of Valor, the highest commendation the department could bestow. In 50 years, only 3 humans had received it. Rex would be the first canine. Miller gestured Emma forward. Would you like to do the honors? Sarah nodded encouragement. Emma stood slowly, walked to the stage on legs that still trembled sometimes. Daniels lifted Rex to his feet. The old dog's tail wagged once, twice. As Emma approached, she took the medal from the mayor with both hands, had to stand on tiptoes to reach around Rex's neck. Her small fingers fumbled with the clasp. Daniels helped her secure it. Emma stepped back, looked at Rex, and said clearly, "Good boy, you're such a good boy." The crowd erupted. Applause that rolled like thunder, people wiping eyes, embracing strangers, celebrating the kind of story that reminded them why communities mattered, why loyalty mattered, why some things couldn't be measured in budget reports or efficiency metrics. But Sarah noticed what others missed, how Rex swayed slightly on his feet, how his breathing had become labored even standing still, how Daniels kept one hand under the dog's chest, ready to catch him if he fell. After the ceremony, Sarah approached Daniels privately. "How bad is it?" The officer's jaw worked. "Vet says any day now. His heart's barely functioning. Every beat's a gift at this point. Is he in pain?" "Some. They've got him on medication." But Daniels looked away. "I don't want him to suffer, but I also don't want to make that choice. He's earned the right to go on his own terms." Sarah watched Rex accepting attention from a line of children who'd waited to pet the hero dog. Each child's touch brought his tail up a little. Each whispered thank you kept him standing when his body wanted to collapse. "I want to adopt him," Sarah said suddenly. Daniels turned. "What? Rex saved my daughter, kept my husband's promise. The least I can do is give him a home for whatever time he has left." Her voice steadied. "He shouldn't die in a kennel. He should die surrounded by the family he protected. Sarah, the medical costs, there's something I haven't told anyone." She pulled an envelope from her purse. The community raised money for Emma's recovery. They said for us to get back on our feet. She opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $180,000. Donations from across the country, people who'd heard Emma's story and wanted to help, wanted to believe that goodness still existed in the world. "The hospital bills are covered by victims' assistance," Sarah continued. "The bank for our mortgage after the publicity. Mrs. Anderson has been bringing us meals every day. We don't need this money, but Rex does. That's meant for you, for Emma. And I'm choosing to use it this way." Sarah's eyes shone. "James would have wanted it. He loved that dog-like family, and Rex loved him back the only way dogs know how with everything he had, until there was nothing left to give." The paperwork took 3 days. The city council, still reeling from public outrage over the attempted canine cuts, approved the adoption unanimously. They also reversed the program elimination, citing overwhelming community support and demonstrated effectiveness. The $200,000 budget shortfall got resolved through private donations that poured in after Rex's medal ceremony. Officer Hayes submitted a formal apology to Chief Miller. "I was wrong," he wrote. "Technology has its place. But it can't replace heart. It can't replace loyalty. I spent my career thinking progress meant leaving the old ways behind. Rex taught me that wisdom and courage don't have expiration dates." On a cold afternoon, as winter started loosening its grip, Sarah brought Rex home. Their apartment was small 2 bedrooms, barely enough space, but it was warm and safe and filled with the smell of the pot roast Mrs. Anderson had dropped off that morning. Emma had prepared a bed in the corner of her room, blankets piled thick, a worn rope toy James had bought 6 years ago, and a framed photo of James in his uniform with Rex at his side. She'd written "Best Boy" in crayon and taped it to the wall above the bed. Rex sniffed everything carefully, the apartment, the blankets, the toy. Then he turned 3 circles and collapsed with a sigh that sounded like "finally." Sarah knelt beside him, ran her hand down his back, feeling each rib, each breath. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping your promise, for bringing her home." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. That night, Emma read to him from her favorite book. Sarah cooked dinner for the first time in months. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but it filled the apartment with normalcy, with life moving forward instead of drowning in trauma. After dinner, they sat together on the couch, Emma wedged between her mother and Rex, one hand buried in his fur outside. The first signs of spring pushed through melting snow, buds on trees, birds returning, the world remembering how to hope. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "do you think Daddy knows Rex found me?" Sarah's throat tightened. "I think your daddy knew Rex would never stop looking. That's why he made you that promise." Uncle Mike said promises are just words. Uncle Mike was wrong about a lot of things. Sarah kissed her daughter's head. Real promises aren't just words. They're choices we make every day. Your daddy chose to be loyal. Rex chose to be loyal. And those choices mattered more than anything. Emma considered this. Then, I'm going to be a K-9 officer when I grow up, just like Daddy. So I can keep promises, too. Rex's breathing had slowed to the deep rhythm of sleep. His paws twitched, chasing something in dreams, maybe suspects, maybe lost children, maybe just his handler, who waited somewhere beyond pain and time. Sarah pulled a blanket over all three of them. The Medal of Valor hung from Rex's collar, catching lamplight, gleaming like hope made tangible. 2 months later, on a morning when sunlight streamed through windows and Emma's laughter echoed from the next room, Rex laid his head in Sarah's lap and simply stopped. No struggle, no pain, just a gentle exhale, and then peace. They buried him beside James at Hillside Cemetery. The entire police department attended. So did half the town. Emma placed her favorite drawing on the casket, a picture of Rex with angel wings, flying toward a stick figure labeled Daddy. The headstone read, K-9 Rex, Medal of Valor, loyal to the end, never left anyone behind. Beneath, in smaller letters, good boy, forever and always. 6 months after that. Sarah stood in the empty lot where the Thompson house had been demolished. The city had sold her the land for $1. Community volunteers had spent spring and summer building something new on the foundation where Emma had nearly died. The sign above the entrance read, James Thompson K-9 Memorial Center. Inside training facilities for police dogs. A veterinary clinic offering free care for retired case, and a small museum dedicated to handlers and dogs who'd served the community. Rex's Medal of Valor occupied the place of honor, surrounded by photos of his career. Emma, now 8, helped cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony. Officer Daniels had become the center's first director. Even Officer Hayes volunteered weekends, working with the young dogs, learning patience from animals who couldn't be rushed. The first class of K-10 trainees graduated that fall. 5 dogs, 5 handlers, all dedicated to the principle that technology served humans, but dogs saved souls. And in the lobby, a bronze statue depicted a German shepherd sitting alert, gaze fixed forward, ready to search forever if that's what love required. Beneath the statue, a plaque bore words James had written in his training manual years ago. Trust the K-9, they never lie. Sarah visited often, brought flowers for the memorial garden, watched Emma grow into the kind of person who kept promises, who understood that loyalty wasn't weakness, that aging didn't mean useless, that sometimes the most profound courage came from those the world had written off. She'd learned it from a dying dog who refused to quit, from a husband whose love transcended death, from a daughter who survived darkness because someone wouldn't stop searching. The world kept turning, seasons changed, but some things remained constant, the bonds we forge, the promises we keep, and the truth that love, real love, never abandons its post, not even when death calls, especially not then. Sometimes we forget that the greatest heroes don't need youth or strength. They just need hearts that refuse to quit. Rex was 8 years old with a failing heart. dismissed as obsolete by a world obsessed with newer and faster. But he knew something technology never will, that loyalty isn't measured in efficiency. It's measured in love that persists when every reason says, stop. How many times have we been told we're past our prime, that our best days are behind us? Rex proved that wisdom, experience, and an unwavering heart matter more than any algorithm. He saved Emma not despite his age, but because of everything those years had taught him about devotion. If you've ever felt invisible, remember this. Sarah was drowning in debt and despair until a community that seemed indifferent rallied around her. Mrs. Anderson, 80 years old, stopped a suicide with compassion. Officer Daniels trusted his instincts when everyone else trusted machines. Even Michael found a sliver of redemption through confession and consequence. We're never too old to matter, never too broken to heal, never too late to keep the promises that define us. Rex taught us that the most powerful force in this world isn't technology or youth. It's love that refuses to abandon its post. What promises are you still keeping? Who taught you that loyalty matters more than convenience? Share your story below. We'd love to hear about the hero, human or animal, who never gave up on you.